situation where saying, well, you're on Maxwell Anthony VENN-BROWN. Well, your documents say you, but this is for Anthony VENN-BROWN, not Maxwell Anthony, and you can't fly. You know what they're like.
I believe we're live. Anthony VENN-BROWN, hello.
Hello there, Pat.
We were just having this conversation. Is your a birth name of public record or not?
Yes, it is.
So your first name's actually Maxwell, and I booked your ticket to come to Dunedin from Auckland, who you happened to be here from Sydney for a week, under just Anthony, and you thought that Jetstar were going to be dicks.
I was a little concerned because I know how fastidious airlines can be around legal documents.
Yeah. And they weren't?
Through it now. Well, I just had my boarding pass on the phone, so I just went to the gate and went.
So that pre-check-in's pretty cool, eh?
The what?
So you'd already checked in?
Pre-check-in. I thought you said something about a chicken.
Chicken.
Okay,
so we're going to have officially you're our first international guest. Are we going to have to make jokes or make accommodations the whole time about accents?
I'll be very cautious about the way I speak.
Yeah.
And I'll be very, very attentive to every word that you say.
So you spent a lot of time in New Zealand when you were young. Are you a Kiwi who's gone to Australia, or were you an Australian who was here, like way back in the 70s, sort of thing?
No, I'm Aussie born and bred.
Okay.
Yeah, Sydney, where I was born and where I lived. And then I came to Bible College in New Zealand in 1970 when I was 20.
Right. Wow.
So I had quite a bit to do with New Zealand from then on. Came here for my honeymoon.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
And this is crazy what's happened here. I mean, people don't know what happens behind the scenes, but I've kind of been in contact with you for several years, off and on, just Facebooky type stuff. Mm-hmm. I noticed you were in New Zealand from Australia, and I sent you a Facebook message going, hey, any chance you want to come to Dunedin? Yeah. And long story short, in the space of 2 or 3 days, you're here in Dunedin.
We pulled it together.
Yeah, just like that. So let me just say this publicly and accurately. Both Jason and I are incredibly grateful you came down. I know that, it's a 2-hour flight down, it's a 2-hour flight back, and then there's the journeying through the, between the airports and stuff. So we really do genuinely appreciate you getting down here, basically to have a chat with us.
Well, look, what you should really appreciate even more is the fact that I was up at 4:30 this morning.
Oh my goodness.
To be down here, because that's been the biggest sacrifice.
Why 4:30? Where are you staying in Auckland?
In Auckland, but just on Queen Street. But they said you was meant to be at the airport 2 hours before. Okay.
So Jetstar did well with not worrying about your name, but they were kind of dicks with making you commute up 2 hours early. Because it's half an hour. Isn't it normally half an hour, Jace, for Jetstar? Half an hour before flight?
Half an hour. It's half an hour for New Zealand. I think Jetstar's 45 minutes domestic. Jetstar are way longer because most people that fly Jetstar are trying to save a buck, and so they're mostly amateur travelers. Not saying that you're an amateur traveller. I'm an Air New Zealand snob. I never fly Air New Zealand. So.
I'm shocked.
And when you were here in the 70s, you didn't do a travelling, but you haven't really seen much of Dunedin. You liking what you see? I put on a good day for you.
Yes, it's a beautiful day, and of course you're a bit of a tour guide.
Yep, did a bit of that.
Sure, yeah, this is church, or this is a university town, and and
and after this, we'll head out to Sinclair and have lunch. On the water. It'd be nice.
If you're not, if you find that this isn't working for you, there's always a job for you, I guess, as a tour guide.
He has to show you the Mosgiel sign as you go back to the airport.
No. He's from Mosgiel. That's like
the Hollywood sign. It's our only tourist attraction.
Yeah.
Basically, on the hill as you go past Mosgiel, we've ripped off the Hollywood sign and just says Mosgiel.
It's a little town outside Dunedin that tries to pretend like it's part of Dunedin. Is that fair, Jace?
No, actually, we don't want to be part of Dunedin. Everybody, we write letters to the editor when we get told when we get referred to as part of Dunedin. So you don't do that. No,
What's the demographic?
Old. People who write letters to the editor, like my dad.
Mosgill's lovely. So look, I know a fair bit about your background and about your history. Should we show this right now?
Yeah, I can do that.
This is this. We do this.
This
like
is
this.
Right.
And Jace, we want to have a look at the Facebook page. You want to bring that up for us? So the book is A Life of Unlearning, a preacher's struggle with his homosexuality, church, and faith. This is your book. And is this a second edition? Because didn't you have an earlier edition?
No, this is the third edition.
Okay, so third edition. And there's an audiobook version of it, which myself being dyslexic, I grabbed the other day and had a bit of a listen through.
I'm not happy with the
I was hoping to hear Stephen Fry, because he does most audiobooks, doesn't he?
The audio is the first edition,
yep.
And of course this has been vastly improved. over 3 editions. It sold out twice. It became a bestseller in Australia. So, it's not too bad. And I get emails constantly. Like even this week, I've got 3 messages on Facebook, a couple of emails of people just saying, I read this in 2 cities, or, this has changed my life. This is just what I needed. Your story is my story. That's been happening since 2004.
So we've got you here to talk. The Department of Conversation, what we do here, is not an interview. We try not to be an interview. As you know, anyone can lead the conversation. It's like having a chat over a beer or a Chardonnay. And talking about life, the universe, and everything, as the Hitchhiker's Guide says.
Right.
So why don't we just throw it to you and you tell us why you're here? I mean, tell us a bit about your story. Where did you start? What's going on? I mean, an abridged version is the evangelical world in Australia. You were up there back in the day. You were.
Why don't you just run with what you know, and I can interject, and correct you.
Well, you were a growing voice in the evangelical world, Pentecostal world.
Yeah.
Okay. Difference between those two for people.
Well, Pentecostal speak in tongues, chase demons, raise their hands a lot, and clap a lot, and breathe fire occasionally.
Breathe fire.
Occasionally.
Metaphorically or literally? What are you saying?
The evangelicals tend to be more Bible believing and a little bit more...
bit more litigious?
Yeah.
So to speak?
Yes, a bit more litigious. Do people know what litigious means?
I think so.
I hope so.
Well, when you say litigious, you think about suing people, but a bit more. This is the official and real and accurate word, and this means this because this means this, and very
pedantic.
Pedantic might be it. I love speaking to people like that because you know what I always ask them. This is my question. It's like because people who are in that camp tend to say things like, "I literally believe every word in the Bible." Right. That's what those people tend to say. Yeah. And so I typically ask them 2 questions. I say, "Was Jesus a sheep?" Because it literally says he was a lamb. Right. So was he a sheep?
Right.
And the other thing I like to ask them is, when Noah and his ark landed, what did the carnivores eat for the first 12 months?
Right. You thought this through.
Well, because if supposedly, so the story goes, there's 2 of every kind, and I know there was more than that for some. Think about how many sheep a lion would eat, and if these are the only animals left, right. What did all the carnivores eat in the first 12 months back on land?
Yeah, lots of vegan cats.
Vegan cats. There is a lot of new posting in America for vegan cats, and all the cats look very sickly and unhealthy. It's horrible.
That's deep.
Yeah,
that's really deep.
So you were a voice in that Pentecostal world, So explain to me, obviously your book, A Preacher's Struggle with His Homosexuality, Church and Faith.
Yeah.
Your life, you were in the church all the way through and you always knew that there was this part of you, or you didn't know, or tell us about it.
Let's go back to high school.
Okay.
Actually, I just had my 50-year high school reunion last weekend, which was absolutely amazing. So nobody in my year knew about my homosexuality.
Did you?
Oh yeah.
Okay, so when you weren't confused at school. You knew what was there.
Yes, I knew what was there, and what I knew. 2 things I did know was, number 1, don't dare tell a soul.
Mm-hmm. Why not?
Well, because you could go to jail.
Okay, so illegal. When was it legalised in Australia? Because I think New Zealand was 86.
Different states, 84 for New South Wales.
Okay.
But so I was a criminal. The dictionary said I was a pervert. I was a deviant. A couple of guys in my high school suicided.
Wow. So let me just clarify: it was illegal to even be gay, or was it illegal to act upon your homosexuality, like to commit acts?
Well, it depends what you refer to as an act, because the laws, like I could be imprisoned for propositioning a detective which had been placed there so it was raconteur is a name, isn't it, for that? Yeah. So that they would send provocateurs there to try and arrest entrap gay men. That's not what I'm looking for. So had that happened to me, then I would of course be arrested, even though I had done nothing.
It's fucking ridiculous. I mean, can you imagine in this day and age? Actually, it's like you're talking to someone who was a part of slavery. It's like talking to someone, an African American who wasn't allowed to drink at a white person's. Yeah. It's just unfathomable 40, 50 years later.
Well, I'm studying. At the moment, I'm researching for my next book.
Yep.
Called The Quest to Cure Queers, which is about the history of gay conversion therapy. And it goes back to post-war period, where there was a huge crackdown on homosexuality.
Post-World War II?
Post-World War II.
So we're talking 40s?
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah, 50s.
50s, okay.
50s, yeah. So it was happening all over the world. In the UK, it's happening in the US and in Australia, and would it be happening here as well? Because they wanted to get everybody back into this moral framework. There were these babies being born. They wanted the families to be all very stable, etc., etc. And homosexuality was seen as the big threat of corruption because there had been an incredible amount of same-sex activity and freedom during the war. World War II. So
soldiers go off to wherever.
And lesbians go into the forces, or they're in same-sex environments, doing industrial. There are all these environments where
men were thrown together with men and women were thrown together with women.
Yeah, and people fell in love, and people found each other. People found that they weren't the only person like that.
Right.
And of course, there are amongst men, Kinsey discovered that about 40%, about 37% of men have a same-sex experience to the point of orgasm. So, this was not just gay men. This was heterosexual men who were having some experiences as well, same-sex experiences. So being brought up in that environment, living in that, I was born 51.
Right.
So I lived in that environment of that huge clampdown, and so going to high school and discovering what I was experiencing with other guys and on the streets and in parks, that this is something that could send me to jail, a juvenile delinquent place, or I could be institutionalized.
So up until including things like shock therapy and that kind of stuff to try and cure it or stop it. Yeah. Wow.
Or just locked away.
Yep.
So there's this huge desperation in me to try and do what I can to change this. So, as I say, there's two things I knew. Number one, keep it a secret. And number two, do everything I possibly could to try and change this.
So was there someone in your life, a parent, a confidant who also encouraged you to keep it a secret? Or were you just someone who went, I know that no one else can know?
I knew that I couldn't tell a soul. And the only reason it came out was that I got so depressed and had already been contemplating taking my own life. And a neighbour that I was close to, we had a conversation. She said she could tell something was wrong, and she probed, and I rolled back my sleeves and she saw the marks on my wrists, and so then she talked to my parents, talked to my mum. Didn't dare tell my dad because that would be so much shame attached to that.
Right, wow.
And then I went off to a psychiatrist after that.
So this is still school age? You're still a teenager?
Yeah, I'm still in my final year at high school.
Okay, so you're 17, 18.
17. And then during the school holidays, that's when I became a born-again Christian.
Right.
That began the faith journey. But the thing that brought me into that, of course, was, everything else I've tried hasn't worked.
Yeah.
My willpower, the psychiatry. But maybe God can do this. So that began that journey.
And that journey is, on some levels, continued on to this day because you're still being involved with this world, this church world.
Yes, very much so.
Well, how would you describe yourself today? Like then, you're now 19 and you're a born again Christian, right? A happy clappy Pentecostal born again Christian.
Yeah.
How would you describe your? Not to stop that conversation because I want to talk about your life, but today, 48, 50 odd years later. Who are you in this faith journey?
Right. Well, I would consider myself today having a very, very privileged position of being an ambassador for the LGBTI. And for those who don't know what that acronym is for, it's for lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and intersex community. That I take on an ambassadorial type role as opposed to an adversarial type role. Reaching out to churches, Christian organisations, denominations, leaders, to engage them in a dialogue and conversation about LGBTI issues, our community, our relationships, those sorts of things. That's what I do now.
And when it comes to a personal faith position, are you still someone who participates in a faith? Are you someone who is a part of a church? Do you do that kind of thing still to this day?
I don't do church. It's interesting. I think that I do church, but not in a traditional way. In that I have community, like all the things that you want in a church, I have those things, but I don't have it within a Christian context. I have it with my friends. I have my own spirituality. I have my own beliefs. I am very, very much in line with my life purpose, very centered on that. And that's a very fortunate place to be. Of course, a lot of people go, what does God want me to do with my life? You know, go, well, I know exactly what I'm supposed to be doing with my life. That's why I'm here.
Which is why you decided to come to Dunedin for the day, on some level.
Yep. A little voice said, you go and do that.
And have a nice lunch. That's what we're going to do. And some Chardonnay. Some Sinclair Chardonnay.
You should do this. That's what I felt. You should do this.
Good.
I go, yeah, that's why I'm here.
Well, we're very grateful. So you're 17. You become a born-again Christian.
Yeah.
Then what?
Well, the conversion experience, anyone who's had a born-again experience knows that that's quite dramatic, emotional. It was for me. And I thought, yay, great, Jesus has set me free from my homosexuality. I found out soon that was not the case. It was still there. And then I heard about the baptism of the Holy Spirit. And, of course, the reason that Christians don't have the power is they don't have the Holy Spirit,
right,
according to the charismatic movement. So I'm in the beginnings of the charismatic movement in Sydney and the Jesus Revolution.
Yeah, so this is like 68, 69.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
So that's really Lonnie Frisbee, hippie preacher kind of era.
Exactly.
Wow, cool.
Yeah, Dave Wilkinson, all that I'm being fed all this stuff, and know that there's Jesus transforms lives, you know, of alcoholics and drug addicts and gang leaders and prostitutes and homosexuals. So if I hadn't overcome, that must be that I don't have the power, which means I need to get baptized in the Holy Spirit. And then I found that didn't really work either.
Right.
And then the next step was during Bible college that I was on one of my downers. So my Christian life was very much like a roller coaster. And then on one of those downers in Bible college, it was suggested that the reason that I did not had not overcome was because I had demonic spirits in me.
Right.
And then I went to the top of the range deliverance ministries. A guy by that.
So just before we jump into that, just explain for people who don't understand, who don't get it. What is a deliverance ministry? Right, a deliverance ministry is somebody who supposedly has a specific ministry to cast demonic spirits out of people. So if somebody has an addiction, somebody has, usually it's around a sexual thing, or it could be gambling, or it could be smoking, that people would believe that was a demonic force. So when we say demonic, you mean within that church context, they believe in a literal demon type attachment to that person. Yes. Yeah. They're dwelling them. Yeah. Yeah. So someone has a ministry in that they can get rid of that demon character from that person's life. Yes. And when I say character, I don't mean metaphorical. I mean a literal blimmin', I'm not going to put a picture to it, but what people would imagine is a little red oogie boogie kind of demon thing. Yeah. But who knows what they look like. So it's a force that's literally attached to you. It has a presence, and these people, their ministry, meaning their job in the church, is to help people get rid of them. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. There you go. So you went to the biggest ones when you were about to say... Neville Johnson at Queen Street Assemblies of God, okay, and Jeff Lloyd. And because I had friends who had contacts with them, and the Bible College had contacts with them. So over several weekends, I went up there and would be there because they said, the anointing is really after the service to do this sort of work. So if you come to the evening service and afterwards, we take you up to the upper room and then we start working on casting demons out of you. And
lots of confessions about all sorts of things and beliefs that, maybe these demons entered because my father was in the Masons, and because I stole this and because I did that, and racking your brain about all these possible times you opened the door, to let this demonic force in. So
you stole a Morrow bar. Hello, you're gay.
Yeah.
Makes sense to me.
Yeah.
He says very sarcastically for those who are listening to this podcast rather than seeing my face.
I should say too, Pat, that there could be people listening who've been through that same experience.
Right.
And it's very traumatic. The fact that you have got to that point where you believe that a demonic force has possessed you, this is not a good place to be mentally. Also, the experiences are usually very dramatic and very physical. And if you can't find an explanation for that, you're left with some doubts about what really went on. But as I've researched this, I've discovered that there are a lot of things at play. One is hyperventilation.
When you're going through this experience, that feels like something massive is happening right here and now.
Yeah, for me, it was very physical.
Yeah.
And I was told, just keep breathing out, And what I was doing was expelling all the oxygen from my lungs, and my fingers started to tingle and my mouth started to contort. And I thought, oh my God, the demons are getting a hold of me, and you then you get yourself into a really emotional state. And the mind is very, very clever, and the mind does some strange things, and if you've got all this subconscious belief about yourself as being evil, debauched, an abomination, all these things, what that does to your mental state in that particular experience, it ends up being very, very traumatic.
So that narrative's already in your head, you're saying, and when you attach that to the experience, ipso facto, all sorted.
Yeah. I walked out of there. You saw the video.
Yeah, let's have a look at this. So this was at a place, it was 510 Queen Street in Auckland?
810.
810 was it?
810, yeah.
And you actually revisited it in the last couple of days.
Yeah.
And you posted, we'll play a little bit of this, Jace.
Queen Street in Auckland.
So this was a couple of days ago.
I walked up the street to find 510. 510. But there actually was nothing there. The next number is 520. So 510 has completely disappeared. Why is 510 significant? Well, in 1971, I was 20. And after thinking that I'd been delivered of my homosexuality when I got converted in 1969, discovering I hadn't, then getting baptized in the Holy Spirit 12 months later, believing then I was free of my homosexuality. When I went to Bible college in 1971,
all right, I was bring that down, Jason. So this is the story you're telling us now. So, but you actually, I was going to say, made a pilgrimage, went to your own little Mecca, which was the place that you were when you had those prayers.
Yeah.
Why did you do that? What was the result? You tell us rather than us just watching the video. What happened with your trip to this place that no longer exists?
We have ghosts from the past. We all have ghosts from the past. And I've found that one of the things that can be very valuable to deal with those is to confront them and to put yourself in a space where you take back your power. Mm-hmm. When I was in that upper room at Queen Street Assemblies of God, I was literally giving away everything to the ministers who were praying for me. It was a place of incredible humiliation, terrible shame, and I gave away my power. So to go back and stand in that place and declare everything the opposite to what I was experiencing that time, it is very empowering. I've done that several times with different experiences.
So when you say you gave it away, where did it get given to? Who did you give it to?
I gave it to the ministers.
Right. So they had then power over you.
Yes.
I was wondering as well, just a little step backwards, you obviously still knew that the homosexuality was still there, quote unquote, still there. Obviously, this was something when you were at Bible college that was obvious to some people in Bible college because they encouraged you to come along.
I was going through, Bible college is a very intense space, you know, because you're in a hyper spiritualized environment. And so any temptations that you have or any experience that you have that you think is not Christian, it's intensified. The cognitive dissonance increases. And that was happening for me.
So you became super gay for a while. You went off the charts with what you were thinking and feeling.
Not really. It was just there.
More obvious, you're saying, though, because the intensification of it?
Oh, no, it was more that I was thinking thoughts. So I might be being tempted to... I might be attracted to one of the fellow students,
right?
Or I may be masturbating,
right,
and fantasizing, and these are things that you don't masturbate.
So your journey went to the place where you got prayed for. Was that still you basically keeping this internal to yourself and just deciding rather than being helped by, say, the staff at the college?
Well, when the reason that it all came out was that with this intensity. And this was a pattern in my life. I actually disappeared from the college for a day.
Right.
And I went up the mountain behind, and I just had to get away, and I was. And I saw the activity of everyone running around trying to find out where I was. And when I came back, I discovered that a previous student had disappeared and they'd found him drowned at Mount Maunganui, and it was possibly suicide. And so they were petrified that, once again, they'd lost another student. And so it was then I had to sit down with the principal and have a conversation. And he said, what's wrong? And I'm going, I've got... the devil's tempting me. You just spiritualize everything. You just don't want to say the word.
So you couldn't say I'm gay?
Oh, no. No.
So what were you? How did you describe it?
I had a homosexual problem.
Right. Sorry, I need to laugh. Okay.
But this is quite common.
Yeah.
Like you will.
What that does is it doesn't internalize it. It makes it exit. It's something outside of me. It's like I've it's like I've twisted my ankle. That's not my identity. It's an external thing that's wrong with me. It's not my internal. So saying I've got a homosexual problem is like, this is on the outside of me. This is not who I am. This is not who I am. This is out there.
Yeah.
But saying I'm gay is more internalizing it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Totally.
Right.
And that was exactly what's going on. And you'll find, you talk to a lot of gay Christians that have been on quite a journey with this, that they will often tell you that they couldn't use the word gay. People go, why do you have to say you're a gay Christian? Well, for many, many years, they couldn't even own the word gay because that had so many terrible negative connotations to it. So for them to say they're a gay Christian is really actually a very empowering thing for them. So for me, the way that I distance myself from it, I didn't want to take the ownership. It was my homosexual problem. And that was when it was suggested, well, you've been through all this and it must be demonics and demons, and we know a really good demon caster outer.
A good fix-it guy. Fix-it guy.
Yeah, an exorcist.
So when you... Wow, okay. So when you came out of... the AOG.
I will need a glass of Chardonnay after this, by the way.
I actually have some Chardonnay for you. It's sitting in my fridge at home, and because we didn't get a chance to stop it on the way back, and it's called St. Clair. It's a Marlborough Chardonnay, and I've got a bottle for you. And we're picking up some friends to have lunch with after this, and we'll stop in and get it and put it in your bag to take back to Auckland.
Because what happens for us, Pat, is also talking about this stuff is, many of us have PTSD issues.
Right.
And so in telling the story again, you feel like you're in a bit of a weird space afterwards, sometimes worse than others.
Yeah.
I mean, there's times when I've done interviews and walked away and cried.
Right. Well, hopefully you don't feel that today.
No. Well, you're there to give me a good hug anyway. But, it does impact you.
Yeah.
Yeah. And a glass of Chardonnay can help.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I wish we had some here. We could get Ombrelitos to send some up, Jace. When you were the AOG, whatever the church was that you had this happen, and you walked out of it onto Queen Street or however that happened, in that moment you were like, oh, I'm free, or did you still know?
No, because I'd been through, I remember the last session I had with them.
Yeah.
And they were trying to call up demons in me. They said, come on, come to the surface, come out, you know. And nothing was happening. There was no physical sensations. There was nothing. And they said, looks like we've got rid of them all. And I went, oh, hallelujah.
Right.
That's, you know, it's finally, I'm free. And I walked out of there feeling, and this is, you know, it was same with the conversion, same with the baptism of the Holy Spirit, now with the deliverance. At last.
The formula has been fulfilled. You are sweet as.
Yes.
As we say in New Zealand. Sweet as.
And then it all got fucked up again.
Yeah. So you were what, 19, 20 now?
20.
Yeah.
Yeah. 20.
And that means this is early 70s?
Yes.
And not to jump forward, because I want us to know more about the journey, but you ended up sort of finally coming out in the early 90s?
Oh, 91 I resigned from the ministry.
Okay, so there's exactly 20 years.
Yeah.
So after that moment of, the church pray stuff, and you went, oh, it's all sorted, A plus B equals freedom, how long did it take to kind of go, I still have an issue?
Well, of course, then the next step was, okay, so I've gone through the conversion, I've gone through the baptism of the Holy Spirit, gone through the demon stuff.
Yeah.
Interestingly enough, at the Bible college, there was a woman who came from Australia. And she sat me down in the room in the Bible college and said, look, we have a program back in Sydney, and we work with homosexuals. And you probably feel really good right now about your deliverance. But, you know, we've found that it takes more than casting demons out.
Right.
And we have a program. And should you need some help when you get back to Australia, why don't you get in contact with us and we can talk about that. So in and she was right. And so in 1972, back in Sydney, I then put myself into the very first ex-gay conversion therapy program in the world.
This is where my blood starts to boil a little bit. Jace, while we're talking, can you look up ex-gay ministry apology? Because we'll have a look at that at some stage. We'll just get Jace to cue it up. So it's one of the founders of the ex-gay ministry, I think in America, who apologizes for all the shit they did to people.
Alan Chambers.
Okay. What was his name?
Alan Chambers.
Alan Chambers apology. That's
Did you know I was there for that?
For the apology? Oh, of course I didn't know that. So listen.
We've got lots to talk about.
Oh, this is going to be the longest one we'll do. So next time in New Zealand we'll do part 2. Or maybe we'll just go straight from here to the flight.
Yeah, where are we up to now?
So for those who don't know, let me nutshell gay conversion therapy.
Right, yeah, you do that.
A ministry, again, a church-affiliated organisation that says they can convert people from homosexuality to being straight.
Yes.
Through a series of whatever. But that's the basic synopsis. You are gay, we can make you straight.
Yes.
Right. Yeah. So you went into one of the first, and it's horrific, and it causes people talk about PTSD and all the research. And in fact, if we've got it, Jace, have we got it? Let's do it now. One of the people who started it has actually recanted and apologised to all the people who they put through this ex-gay conversion, saying it's bullshit, it doesn't work. If we've got that, let's play a bit. Can we do that?
Just pulling it up. I think I found him.
Oh, you've seen this, Our America with Lisa Ling.
Yeah, this is.
So is this it?
You'll have to find it. He does it. It's a public. It's not like an interview. It's like he's standing at a pulpit speaking to a bunch of people.
Oh yeah, but here he is in a church in Los Angeles,
and to open a new door, and see if we can do something better than we've done before. Okay, I have something to read, and this. You know, for me, every time I read it and every time I sat down to write...
So this is not the first time he's done it?
There's more.
This is...
And hopefully this is the beginning.
This was shown the night of the...
There's
I'll explain later,
more,
right?
Okay.
Yeah.
To come. So, tried to pack as much in here as I felt like I could in to make it short enough that it wouldn't take the whole time. But I felt like there were some important things in here, and I'll just start. I'd originally thought about posting this through a news agency, but so it's written in that way. So forgive me for when it sounds like an article. It really is meant to be a heartfelt letter. In 1993, I caused a 4-car pileup. I was driving down the road and a bee was buzzing around the inside of my windshield. I hit the bee and it fell on the dashboard, and a minute later it started buzzing again with a fury. Trying to swat it again, I completely missed the fact that a city bus had stopped 3 cars in front of me. I also missed the fact that those 3 cars in front of me were stopping as well. Going 40 miles an hour, I slammed into the car in front of me, causing a chain reaction. I was injured, and so were several others. I never intended for the accident to happen. I would have never knowingly hurt anyone, but I did, and it was my fault. I have no idea if any of the people injured in that accident have suffered long-term effects. While I didn't mean to hurt them, I did. The fact that my heart wasn't malicious doesn't lessen their pain or their suffering. I'm sorry that I chose to be distracted that fall afternoon and that I caused so much damage to property and people. If I could take it all back, I absolutely would, but I can't. I pray that everyone involved in that crash that day has been restored to health. Recently, I began thinking about how to apologize to the people that have been hurt by Exodus International through an experience or by a message. I've heard many firsthand stories from people called ex-gay survivors. Stories of people who went to Exodus-affiliated ministries or ministers for help only to experience more trauma. I've heard stories of shame, sexual misconduct, and false hope. In every case that has been brought to my attention throughout my leadership, there's always been swift action resulting in the removal of these leaders and/or their organizations, but rarely was there an apology or a public acknowledgement by me. And then there's the trauma that I've caused. There were years that I conveniently omitted my ongoing struggles with same-sex attraction. I was afraid to share them as readily and easily as I
could. I can get it down. So he's obviously paralleling the physical damage he caused someone in a car crash to the damage he's caused. He's being responsible for causing people. So Exodus, for those who don't know, is the name of the group that started up the ex-gay ministry thing. So did the conversion therapy.
Yeah, it goes back further than that.
Okay.
So there was an organisation called Love in Action, which was started in San Francisco.
Right.
And that was 1974. And if you come across the movie Boy Erased is about that particular program, which evolved into a residential program.
Why have I heard Boy Erased recently? That's been in the news again? Yeah, I don't know the movie, but I've heard that in the last few days.
Nicole Kidman, Russell Crowe, and it's all about a guy, Jared Connolly, going into a gay conversion therapy program.
Okay. All right. Maybe I've had another conversation with someone that just happens to have come up. So
it's not here in New Zealand, but we've had it in Australia already.
All right.
Yeah. So, and then 2 years later, in 1976, Exodus was founded in a Melody Lane Christian Centre. Mm-hmm. But so there were some other ministries coming together. Then that became the umbrella organisation for a whole range of similar ministries, which believed homosexuality is a sin, it is a result of dysfunctional upbringing. But
one of the biggest things is we can cure you.
Exactly, yeah.
So you were in one of these in the early 70s?
Yeah.
Okay.
The only one that I think that was in existence in the world.
Oh, okay. So that was obviously well before Exodus and those sorts of places. All right.
Yeah. So I was doing this in 1972, and they'd already been going for a few years before then. Yeah.
So your experience, so you've become a Christian, you've had all these experiences, you're supposed to be fixed, quote unquote fixed, hasn't happened yet. You've been through this demon stuff, supposed to be fixed, hasn't happened yet. You're back in Australia and you realise, crap, we better get this sorted again. So you go along to these people who promise to basically cure you. Yeah. What then?
I was told it would take about 2 years.
Okay.
To make me straight. And that was, once again, to give your life over you know, to say I've lost control.
So you're giving your power to this group now.
Yes. Yeah. And it was really quite an abusive situation.
Purposefully, do you think? Or
Oh, yes.
Okay.
With the belief that, you know, that they had to sort of break you and break your pride, that pride was a part of the problem that you had.
Can you give us an example of how that would happen?
Oh, yeah.
If it's not too difficult.
Yeah. And I write about this in A Life of Unlearning too, because what happened was as you're going along, you get more freedom to you know, because essentially, you know, you're in a rehabilitation type situation. Where,
so within the structure of the course, they give you more freedom.
Yes, as you prove yourself, you know, to be trustworthy. So I went out for a week, a day with some fellow people from the centre. And we were down on the south coast of New South Wales, and we stopped at this little town, and there was a street called Queen Street, and I was just being a fool, and I leaned up against it like a prostitute, you know. Someone took a photo of that.
Oh.
And I thought that was quite innocent, but the woman who ran it, Shirley, that Sunday night, my friends, some friends had come down who I hadn't seen for months, and they were there, and all of a sudden she came at me with this photo, waving it, and in front of everybody, she started screaming at me, "If you want to be queer, we can arrange that. Don't you ever let me catch you doing something like this. Ever again."
That really is you with no power. That's someone who's in charge of you.
Completely humiliated in front of my friends, in front of the whole church, everything. And that was that. I just ran into the kitchen and wept. I wept for hours.
Wow.
I was so devastated by that. But that was part of, they did this because they loved you.
Quote unquote.
Yeah. You have you heard of that teaching on agape love? You know that agape love is meant to be like the love of God. Yeah. So therefore, they believe, well, if we're doing this really the love of God, it doesn't matter what we're doing to you. But it's God's highest ideal.
Yeah.
So there I was in that for about 6 months, and then I left. I couldn't stand it anymore.
So you're now 22-ish, and it's 1973-ish, and
21 still.
Still 21?
Yeah, still 21. And because because I had a homosexual problem, because I had never ventured into the gay world or anything, or, you know, my experiences have been in public toilets, you know, there've been these different experiences. So I thought the only way I could get out of this place was to pretend that I had a strategy to go into the gay world, and of course the gay world is terrible. Apparently, everybody's a bitch, and you'll never find love, and they're all lonely, desperate people, and you know, so you won't like it. I thought, well, if I go into that world,
terrible place, it'll kill you.
Then I'll come back and try again because I've lost my motivation. And that was my way of escaping from the place.
Yeah. And what, you had a blast?
I had 7 months, an interesting 7 months. And then I thought, I'm playing with my salvation here. I better be careful.
Right.
I could go to hell.
Right.
Playing around with this. I need to come back to God.
Right.
Which I did.
Okay. And from that point, we're now talking 72, 73. When were you married? When did that all happen?
74. So
okay, so you came back to the church world and then got into quote unquote heterosexual life.
Yeah. Well, it was very easy because I got a job out of Sydney as a commercial traveller, as a sales representative. So I was travelling around the country, based in Orange, and the only Pentecostal church here is a little Assemblies of God church, and I was the youth group.
Right.
And then this other girl arrived in church, and I was a youth pastor.
Right.
And I had a youth group. So we worked together, and it was obvious to everybody in the church that we should be married.
Right.
yeah.
So that narrative started.
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
And I'm sure that you had people who are respectful kind of ministry type people then telling you that this is what God wants as well. You guys should get married. Did that all come out?
They thought it was wonderful because, you know, here God's provided a lovely wife who loves God and wants to serve God. For Anthony, you know, and not many people knew about my past. Some people did.
Right.
The pastor there did, definitely, and his wife. But they're matchmakers, fearless matchmakers.
Well, that's why they call Bible college bridal college, don't they? And it's the quote for it. There's one up in northern parts of New Zealand that's called Lifeway, and they used to call it Wifeways. So
Right.
it's Wifeways and bridal college.
And wasn't
YWAM, young men after women, or young
After
men
wives.
after
men, yeah.
young women after men, after wives again. Yeah.
Exactly.
So I'm interested. You're married. You're married and you're gay.
Yeah, I'm married and I'm gay.
Is it a happy marriage?
It was, yes.
I mean, she's a good chick. She's a lovely wife, lovely person.
Yes, Helen, my former wife. You know, I could never say anything against her. What an amazing woman. She was the mother of our children, an amazing mother. Mm-hmm. She was a wonderful wife. I mean, I used to travel as an evangelist.
Yeah.
6 months of the year I'd be away from home. But also, I should go back. We started off living in a caravan, preaching from church to church.
Right.
She was pregnant with our second child.
So you had one child in a caravan with second on the way.
Yeah.
Back of a you're on Australia, so it's on the back of a Commodore.
It was a station
or a
wagon.
Tirana.
Falcon station
Falcon,
wagon.
there you go. One of the it's got to be one of them.
Station wagon.
That means the station wagon. So you've got storage in the back of the station wagon and a caravan to sleep in.
Yeah, and living by faith.
Yeah,
like, you know, the next
good memories, good time.
Yeah. And we pioneered churches, and then I came to Sydney, and then I started the evangelistic ministry and Youth Alive, and then that's when things started to take off, and I became a very popular preacher. I'm a good preacher.
Yeah. And you were there the same time, did I read, as the guys who do Hillsong, whatever his name is?
Yeah, Brian Houston's.
They were your peers?
Yes, I was. I had offices. I was never employed by Hillsong. Yeah. But I used to preach in their church. I used to preach for Frank and Brian when he was starting off Hillsong up in the hills. And so all the mega churches, you know, I was a bit of a household name as a preacher in that time.
And that's taken you right through the 80s?
Yes, right up to the 80s.
Don't answer this if you don't want to, but you still knew...
So far, so good.
Okay. You still identified yourself as having a quote-unquote homosexual issue, or were you happily married, you had a great friend and your wife, and that seemed to be behind you?
It wasn't behind me. There was sexual activity.
Well, that's what I was going to ask. This is the don't answer if you don't want to.
Yeah.
Were you faithful within your marriage?
It's all there in the book.
Okay. or like, because if you're away, I mean, like, you know, when the boy's away, he got the chance to play, sort of thing.
Yeah.
What was going on?
Well, you know, it's interesting because the greatest dynamic operating in my life then was denial.
Right.
Because, you know, you could justify this, these are these temptations, you know, and then you would fall in inverted commas, and then you would repent, and then you would ask for forgiveness.
Did your wife know that there was falls along the way, or was that secret life?
Yeah, no, that was secret. But I did tell her before we got married that I had a homosexual problem. And, you know, with guys that I've worked with, it's very, very common that they will confess this to their wives before they get married, to clear the air.
Yep.
And, you know, we're both naive enough to think, oh, well, this is God's final miracle.
Yeah, right.
You know, yeah. But, of course, I hadn't changed to being heterosexual. I've coined this phrase, situational heterosexuality. So, you know how they talk about situational homosexuality?
Yeah.
Where people in a
like
prison,
in prison,
for us ex-gays, where it is situational heterosexuality. So within that situation, we can function heterosexually.
Yeah.
But take us out of that, we're gay.
Right.
Campers are old tents.
So you are growing in stature and popularity as a preacher, as a Christian, a speaker of Christian truths and stuff, right through the 80s. How many kids have you got now? End of the 80s?
Two girls.
Okay.
Yeah. Two amazing girls, I might add.
How old are your kids now?
40 and 42.
40 and 42?
Yeah.
It's about my age.
Yeah.
I'm a bit older
Kids.
than that, but yeah. I'll claim
They're
that.
not kids anymore.
No, so grandkids?
Yeah.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
And what's it like now between you and your... Do you call her your wife still? Your then wife? What's
my
your
former
reference?
wife, we have great respect for each other,
Right.
and she remarried, and there's not been animosity.
Good.
And in fact, I'll tell you what, it's amazing because when I left, I didn't want to see my girls.
Really? So let's look at that. So it's your homosexual problem has continued on through your whole marriage.
Yeah.
And you get to a point where you kind of go, enough is enough.
Yeah.
So tell us.
We should talk about that, shouldn't we?
Yeah, we should.
What was it that precipitated that?
Yeah.
What happened was, in one of these encounters,
Yeah.
something happened to me which was different from previous encounters. And previous encounters, the best way that I could describe it was they could be as quick as I could make them. They would be as less physical as I could make them.
Right.
So there's no warmth, there's no tenderness. It could last 30 seconds.
It was a transaction.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
And I want to get out of there as quick as possible.
Right.
I don't want to be here.
Is that big because you had within you this juxtaposition, I want to do this, but I shouldn't be doing this, so let's just get it over with and...
This is evil.
Right.
This is not what God wants.
Right.
This is not holiness.
Right.
It's not righteousness. This is not Jesus. This is the flesh. This is the devil.
But this time it was different.
Yes. Something happened that night, and it was beautiful. It was tender. It was loving. And this was all about him, what he was doing for me. Mm-hmm. And I had never experienced this. And he wrote down his telephone number at the end and said, what if you're in Brisbane again? Let's catch up.
Yeah.
And I said, no, I never see anybody a second time. That's very safe.
Yeah, totally.
I told her.
No strings.
Yeah. And because what I was doing was so bad anyway, why would I go back and do it a second time with the same person? But he put that there on both sides of the bed. And the next morning I didn't throw it away. I put it in my wallet. And by the end of the weekend, I was calling him. And we met up before I flew back to Sydney. And within a few weeks, I had this incredible realization that I'd fallen in love.
Wow, as quick as that.
Yeah. And he said to me when I caught up with him a couple of weeks later, because I told him all these lies about what I was doing, and I was afraid of being blackmailed. And then he said to me, "Would you leave your wife for me?" What the fuck? Although I didn't say what the fuck then. but it was just, why would somebody ask that question after a few weeks? And of course I went, don't be ridiculous. But I went away and I thought, look, Anthony, you've spent 22 years of your life doing everything possible on a daily basis to change your sexual orientation. This has never changed. It will never change. What are you going to do about it? And I thought, you know what? I can't preach anymore.
Wow. So that was it, done?
Yep. I can't preach anymore because if I do, up to that point, I was fighting it. From that point on, I went, nah, this is bullshit. Absolute bullshit. So I am going to try and fatal nervous breakdown and disappear into the woodwork, and I'll be with Jason, and we'll live happily ever after.
And I'm suspicious it wasn't quite as easy as that.
Nah. And my wife discovered a letter that I'd written to him.
Wow.
And then when she discovered that, she passed out and collapsed on the floor, and I had to revive her.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah. And then by the weekend, I had confessed to the National Executive of the Assemblies of God. I confessed to my friends, still intending to leave. But then I thought, I wanted to be with Jason. He was in Brisbane.
Mm-hmm.
And I rang him, and I said, I need to be with you now. He says, oh, well, you can't. I said, well, why not? He said, well, no, you can't come up. I burnt all my bridges behind me. And I said goodbye to him on the phone, thinking, oh my God, I've been deceived by the devil. The devil has won.
Wow.
You still there in the story?
Yeah. So what, it was almost like Jason was the embodiment of you burning your bridges, and then you felt this was bigger than everything.
Yeah. And then I thought, well, I've been tempted all the way along. Now Satan really has won completely.
Because you've given in. Finally, you've given in, and you've given in its entirety.
I've lost my ministry, lost my marriage.
Yep.
Everything I built
Yeah.
is now lost.
Yeah.
All because I gave in to sin. But I gave in to love.
Yeah.
And so that next weekend I was doing a public confession in front of 800 people, confessing that I committed adultery and resigning for the ministry. And that day still stays with me.
Why?
Because it was the most traumatic day of my life. I had so much trauma.
Yeah.
I cried for 3 weeks afterwards, the humiliation.
So the trauma was from
the public confession.
Right.
Well,
was that your choice, or was that something that was insisted that you did by those higher up, or what?
Oh, no, it was insisted. But I was willing, I felt I've got to pay, there's a price to pay. And you don't have a lot of self-esteem left by the end of all this.
When you're doing this, are you thinking, once I confess before all, I can get back to life? Or are you thinking, once I confess before all, I'm done? My life is over, sort of thing?
I knew it was the end. End
of everything? End of marriage? End of your church stuff?
No, I was trying to get my marriage back together again, and my faith back together again. I'd lost all that, want to get all that back again. I just knew I would never preach again.
Okay.
But I guess...
But you're working on your marriage and your family?
Yes,
okay.
yeah. And I guess deep down inside there was a hope that maybe there might be... this is a part of my restoration, to demonstrate how repentant I was to do this.
Yeah.
So,
an apology to your wife and your family, and also all those people who are what part of your flock, or under you, or working with you.
With our home church.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And look, I'm being slightly facetious here, but Jesus is this character of love and acceptance and guidance. So I'm assuming once you made your confession, everyone came around you in a loving way and welcomed you into the flock and helped you and supported you. Would that be a fair assumption?
You are being a bit facetious.
Only because I've heard these stories before.
Yeah, look, initially... There was, at that service, there were people who came up and, hugged them. And I just wished the ground would swallow up and, open up and swallow me. What was interesting was the night that I'd said goodbye to Jason and it all blew up. I had a few drinks. I was a bit drunk. I was an absolute mess. And I went to two of my closest friends who today... are high up in the Pentecostal world. And I said to them, I've never asked anything of you, ever. I know what's ahead of me. And I ask you, don't let me go. And I...
Meaning don't kick me to the curb, meaning be there for me?
Yeah, be there for me.
Okay.
And I never heard from them again. Mm. Not a letter, not a telephone call, not a visit. And these people are leaders within the denomination. Sad that they didn't have the capacity. You know, and they say, well, we really didn't know, how to cope with that sort of stuff.
Have you had that? Yeah, have you had that conversation with them subsequently?
But I know that people say that, well, it was all you. They didn't know what to do. Well, if you're in bloody leadership, you got to do better than that.
Yeah.
This is a friend of yours,
yeah,
a fellow minister who you've had preaching in your church. He hasn't been what he said he was. And you've got stuff to deal with this, but he's got a lot more to deal with, and he needs you now. So yeah, I'm very disappointed at the way that they responded to that.
I get frustrated with the church world, the Christian world, because on one level the faith seems so simple. There's a story in the Bible where the Pharisees were trying to kind of trap Jesus about the 10 Commandments and which of these is the best, and what should we do? And he just goes, love God with everything, and love your neighbour as yourself. That's it. That's it. There is nothing else to that faith other than those two things. I was talking to someone the other day who said something really, when someone you're kind of rapping and chatting away and something really wise comes out, they said, so not mine, I'm not claiming it, they said that, and she was talking about her faith, she was like, we get given this book with all the answers, talking about the Bible, and then it's like, but we know nothing. And I was just like, it was one of those moments. So in that kind of faith journey, there's like, you're supposed to know everything because you have all the answers, but actually we know nothing. And even though it's such a simple belief process, if you wanted to make it, a guy who works on News Talk ZB and works for a parenting group, John Cowan, used to talk about that he really likes God. Some of his friends not so much. It's like it seems so simple, and you have forget the whole Christian thing. You have someone coming to you who's sat around your dinner table with you, who's been a friend of yours, who's been a colleague of yours, going, I'm hurting, and you basically go, fuck off. That would seem to be the contrary position to what love your neighbour as yourself is.
Yeah. Do you know, I'm also very forgiving.
You kind of have to be, don't you?
Well, what happened was when I realised that I had been wiped by the denomination, I got a letter from from the president,
basically saying you were no part of this.
Yeah, well, yeah, because of your problem and moral failure. We don't see you ever being in the ministry again. And at this stage, I was bending over backwards trying to do everything the right way, and I thought, well, what am I doing? That was a devastating night that night when I got that letter. But it was then too that I realised, Pat, I've helped other ministers that had fallen morally, or something had happened to them, and I saw how they got bitter and resentful.
You helped them and they got bitter. Why would they get bitter?
With people around them, So what I was.
So they received help from you, but what they couldn't then pass on that help.
Yeah, they allowed the bitterness and resentment to work in their lives, and they gathered people around them who reinforced that. Yeah. And I just saw it was so destructive in their lives. So I remember standing in my kitchen and with an act of my will, going, "I forgive you."
Wow.
I forgive the Assemblies of God. I forgive my friends, what they've done. I know what I have ahead of me are huge challenges. And the last thing I need to be dealing with is to be eaten away with bitterness and resentment. So let me just let that go and I'll forgive you.
So after the church and that basically abandoned you, my word, not yours, but so just to expedite that sort of, they basically said, get the hell out of here. You're no longer us. There's now another 20-year period from then till now. and your life has changed and dramatically turned again. It's interesting. It kind of feels like these three groups of 20. This first 20 years of your life, you're kind of figuring this thing out and trying to go, what am I going to do about this? The second 20 years of your life, you were kind of going, well, I've got this under control and I'm going to play this, heterosexual role. And now this is the third 20 years of your life. It's like, I'm assuming, maybe unfairly, that this is the authentic self coming out, maybe the best time of your life, maybe what you're doing now, as you said earlier, is what you're supposed to be doing. And what's happened, so let's look a few years after your, dismissal from the church. Something's obviously happened to put you on a new track and to find your place in the world. Yeah,
and it might be good because it could be people listening who've had similar journeys, and they don't, and it isn't as cut and dried as we'd like it to be.
Yeah, for sure.
And for what happened to me was, I'd heard for years, this is what you do when you're gay. You sleep around a lot. You go to bars, dance parties, you do drugs, you have a wild life. So, this is what the church says.
Yeah.
So when you actually decide that you are gay, what do? But you don't realise there's actually another world out there. So I had about 8 years, which was pretty wild.
Right.
And had planned to commit suicide at 50. Of course, I'd already heard that there's no such thing as a happy old gay man.
Right, okay.
They're all desperately lonely, bitchy queens and so forth. So I thought, well, I should just live for the next 10 years without all the guilt and just enjoy myself, and then I'll kill myself.
Yeah.
That was the plan.
Yep.
Obviously, that didn't happen. And I did think that I would probably go to hell because of that. Because I had chosen, as opposed to accepting. And so then I was doing a personal development course. And in this personal development course, there were all these things that were really familiar to me, like spiritual principles. And as I was doing this, I went, I used to preach on this stuff. Like, this is really familiar to me.
Yeah.
And it was in the midst of all that, there was a life purpose exercise. And when I did my life purpose exercise, the word God came in there. And I went, what the fuck? No. Like, what does this mean? God was a traumatic word.
Right.
When people would say to me, I'm praying for you, I'd have a panic attack.
Right.
I've been deeply traumatized by all this crap. So when that was there, I went, what does this mean? Does it have to go back? And and I don't know what this means. But I prayed that night for the first time in 8 years, and I said, God, I don't get this, but you and I are on speaking terms again.
It's like making up with the neighbour next door. He's finally giving him his tools back. Okay, here's your plane to get back again. Yes, we can be friends again now.
Yeah. So that was the prayer that I prayed, and that was the beginning of quite an incredible spiritual journey and a reconciling of my faith and my sexual orientation.
And now, as you said earlier, you're an ambassador, so you go around and speak to people in the church world. Do you speak to congregations, or more to leaders and those people who need to be educated, to need to understand a bit more about this life, about this orientation?
Wherever I find a listening ear. So this will be good.
Does that mean you get to preach again? Like, kind of, if you're speaking in front of a congregation?
Oh, yeah.
What does that feel like? Does it feel nice to be up in front of a congregation now? Because you're basically preaching, aren't you?
Yeah. That's a good question. How does it feel?
You're preaching if there's more than two people. Is it more than two of you gathered in my name?
Yeah. Well, you speak, don't you?
Well, I haven't done public speaking for a little while, but I have done, yeah.
It's like when you do this radio program. Sometimes you will go, that was okay.
Yeah.
Other times you go, I nailed that one.
Yeah.
That was fabulous. Yeah.
But I just wonder from that day where you had that realization, you go, I can't preach anymore, to now you basically standing in front of, let's say, a church congregation. You might think it's more a seminar, but it's basically preaching.
Yeah.
Does it feel nice to be back up there?
It feels, what it does feel nice is to know you're making a difference.
Nice. Whether it's one person or 1,000.
Yes. You know. And recently I went through a bit of a challenging time back in Australia with some people within my community being disrespectful of the work that I've done over the years. And that was very challenging. And the way that so instead of attacking and, causing drama, I reframed it, Pat. And just when I was trying to deal with the nastiness, I got an email from somebody who had read A Life of Unlearning.
Right.
And was telling me about their life and what was happened and how the book had helped them, and they hadn't come across this story before, and their whole life was turned around because of it. And I thought, oh, Anthony, get over yourself. Yeah, okay, so you've been doing this for 18 years and and just let all that history go and remember, why are you doing this?
Yeah.
Why are you doing this? You're doing this one life at a time, one heart, one mind, and that person is changed. And if that's what we focus on, the other stuff just disappears.
It's interesting. I've got a friend who writes and makes programs within the church world, and he found out, and I don't know how long ago it was, but last time I talked to him, he told me the story that the prisons in New Zealand were all taking his resource and just basically photocopying them and using them, and he wasn't getting a royalty from it. He just went, fine, got to just let it go. If it's helping, it's helping. Whereas he could have gone, hey, copyright infringement, and he just he gave it back.
Yeah.
So it's a good thing.
It took me a while to get there.
Yeah, but you're there.
I got there.
Yeah, I think it's interesting as well to think about what's happened within Australia and in the culture. Like you guys have had same-sex marriage fairly recently, certainly a lot later than New Zealand.
12 months.
Yeah, so that's do you celebrate that, or do you kind of still roll your eyes going, what, it takes so long, or is it a bit of everything?
A bit of everything,
yeah.
And it was interesting, I didn't celebrate the day they announced.
How come?
Because I know it's not over.
What is there still to do? What's the fight now?
See, nearly 40% of Australians said no, you can't have this. And and what some people in our community don't realise is, what they experienced for a few months during the postal vote, anyone from a faith background has lived with for decades.
Of course. And that seems to be, part of my background is being working as an ally in the LGBT world, and especially amongst the church world. The church world seems to have a different view of it because you're allowed to discriminate and you're allowed to have certain views if they are a deeply held religious belief. So yeah, that seems to be the area within, and I'm not actually picking on one particular church, because the same could be said for Islam, the same could be said for other beliefs as well, that it's like what's happening in society seems to have some drag over to the religious world, a generation later or 2 generations later, or who knows. I do think that in the church world it's beginning to change, and on some level, as horrible as it sounds, as the older generation passes away and moves on, the younger generation are far more accepting of these sorts of issues, and that is visible both in society and in the church.
Yeah. And there's a couple of things that probably would be good to say. This is a really, really disappointing thing, is that I know of a megachurch pastor who has said to his leadership that this whole gay marriage stuff, in 10 years' time, it won't even be an issue.
Meaning what?
He will sit and wait for that to be the norm. That he will not stand out, that he will not be affirming of gay and lesbian people in his church, that he will have a welcoming church, an accepting church, but never an affirming church, because he does not want to ruffle the feathers. He does not want to deal with the controversy
of the congregation, of what's the because it would seem to me that seems a bit counterproductive if you're thinking what's happening in society. So whose feathers is he ruffling to not be accepting?
There's this thing I call the homosexual hip hop.
Right.
So what happens is that a person or a denomination or a Christian organisation will take a step forward.
Mm-hmm.
Then there'll be this huge backlash.
Yeah, of course.
For the conservatives, and then they'll take a step back
and normally apologise for what they've done, which is ridiculous.
I mean, what was the charity organisation in the US that did this, like Compassion? Anyway, a major, Christian charity, incredibly well respected, decided that they would provide the same rights for same-sex couples that they gave to heterosexual couples. Well, all these people said, well, that's the end of your donations. We're not going to support your work anymore. Lovely Christian people. That's what they did.
That was to their employees, wasn't it?
Yes,
to their employees.
Yes.
So basically saying we will no longer discriminate against same-sex couples, as we shouldn't do under the law.
No, we will provide the same benefits.
Yeah, so we won't discriminate against them.
Yeah, exactly, yes. So that's what happened. Did you find out what it was?
No, I think it's a bit too...
World Vision. It was World Vision US, yeah.
Oh, right, there we go. World Vision.
It was World Vision US that did it.
So a major evangelical Christian charity will now allow married gay employees.
Yeah.
So they came out and they said that, and it was welcomed and stuff by society and by a lot of people, but by the donors, who obviously provide all the money for World Vision, they went, we ain't having that. And they came out and they apologised and retracted.
Yeah.
So what they're saying is, please, gay people working for us, doing charitable work, could you get back in the cupboard for us?
Exactly. It's like if you've been gay or lesbian in one of those Christian organisations and you've been living with, the possibility that you could lose your job or a fear of, not be able to live authentically, there is this hand being outstretched out to you. You think, this is so good. And while you're reaching out for that hand, and they slap you across the face. That's exactly what it's like.
Is it kind of I could be getting more eyes crossed, but wasn't there a talk about the US repealing Don't Ask, Don't Tell? Or like, because they got rid of that and then they're thinking about bringing it back in or something? Was that drawing parallels within the US military? Like that, because now it's acceptable, but were they trying to go back on that or something?
They're going back on trans people in the military.
That could be what I was getting my eyes crossed on.
That was Trump. Good old Trump.
Oh, God, let's not go there. It gets too much airtime already, doesn't it? I see parallels in some Christian New Zealand organisations. I know of one in particular, very, very well known, who had a change of CEO, and the LGBT community was welcomed on board. People who are working there who I know who are gay and that kind of stuff. And then a new CEO came on board, and all of a sudden all those people disappeared. Didn't fit in with the ethos of it. So I understand what you're saying. I mean, I'm assuming you're going to say no, but this mega church pastor who's basically saying we're never going to be welcoming of gay people, do we know who it is? Oh, I know who it is. Yeah, I know who it is.
But we're not going to know?
Oh, no. I'm going to let you... people can make their guesses. Okay. But I want to tell you it's not just one, because there's a boys' club.
Right. Oh, so they're all together.
There's a mega church boys' club.
Yeah, I do remember...
and they meet together regularly.
I do remember the kind of Sunday evening meetings at Denny's after all the services were finished sometimes, and everyone comparing what was going on. So here's a question.
Can I just finish off with that?
Sorry,
because I think it's important that so what they know how divisive this issue is.
Now, we'll just again clarify, divisive amongst their parishioners.
Divisive. It has the potential to split your church. Now, if you built this huge empire, this big mega church, which has churches all over the globe, are you going to introduce a topic which is has a potential to split this. It could split it all apart. And you talk to anybody that's taken a stand with this, and they've all paid a price. You probably paid a price at times for doing this.
Yep.
You know, but what I'd like to say to these mega church pastors is, think about the young person in their church. While they're waiting 10 years, they might not make it.
Yeah.
Because they could kill themselves. Think about the parents who have no idea about homosexuality or sexual orientation or gender identity, and they are being so cruel to their child and not accepting, not embracing them, not loving them. And Mr. Megachurch Pastor, their blood is on your hands.
Well, it also seems to me the mega church world, and you have lots of examples of this in America, is that, for example, the people who scream the loudest about this, in America especially, seem to be the ones caught in the cubicles with the male prostitute.
Yeah.
Is that something that is as prevalent as it would appear, or is it one or two?
Look, what I'm not sure whether everybody realises this, but it has been scientifically proven over and over again that the most homophobic people, the most anti-gay people, actually are harbouring some same-sex attraction or orientation themselves.
There's actually research. I heard someone talking about it the other day. Jace, maybe you can try and find this. Be careful the images that might come up. But there was research done, and I think it was conservative Christians, and they tested blood flow to the genitals.
Yeah.
And the ones who were most conservative had the most blood flow when they saw gay porn and gay imagery sort of thing.
It's been researched many, many times, and it always come up with the same results. Now, here's something else which I think people need to just be reminded of.
Yep.
And that is, we mentioned before about Kinsey said that about 37% of males will have a same-sex experience. So that would mean that every Pentecostal, every charismatic, every evangelical male pastor has had a same-sex experience. And that's quite sobering when you start to think about that.
Yeah. 1 in 3 people sitting in the congregation, 1 in 3 boys, men.
Yeah. And what are they doing with that, and what does that mean to them, and and how is that impacting them? Of course, a same-sex experience doesn't make you gay.
Oh, of course.
Yeah. Otherwise, we'd be a third of the world.
Yes. And it's as 5 to 10%. Is that the actual number?
Yeah,
it's bandied around by different groups, by different people.
It is. We seem to be coming back to the 10% for various things. It's some interesting research on that recently, but you can safely say 3 to 5%.
Yeah, but that's 3 to 5% of men and 3 to 5% of women. So that's 10% of the population.
Usually, no, 3 to 5% of the population.
Okay.
And there's usually less women than there are usually less lesbians than there are gay men. But also then there are, amongst women, you get this phenomenon that we don't get with men, and that is sexual fluidity.
Yep.
And bisexuality.
So me and Jace were talking about this before we started broadcasting. People who go through like the ex-gay ministry. Mm-hmm. Because I'm bouncing off your word fluidity actually, who then are successful in becoming straight, quote unquote successful. I've always thought, are they probably bisexual and then they're able to live that way, or are they more likely gay and they're living a lie? I guess to be fair, or are they fixed, quote unquote? That would be the third option, which we can throw away. But I mean, I wonder how many of those people who say I used to be gay, or who go around the world preaching I used to be gay and now I'm straight, I wonder if they're bisexual. That was the first thing I always thought.
If they're male, I'd say bullshit.
So you think it's all lies?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So all lies rather than bisexual?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Because the males, so, with females, you can get a female who will fall in love with her best friend.
Yeah.
And she'll end up being in a relationship with her. It's a physical relationship and it's a romantic relationship. And they can spend the rest of their lives together. But also they could have the same experience with a male. That's bisexuality. you don't get males falling in love with their best mate and saying, I want to shack up with you.
So are you saying that you don't, I mean, in your opinion, you're saying, it sounds like you're saying men aren't bisexual.
I know there are some men who are generally bisexual, but if we're going to talk about sexuality, we need to talk about it in its true sense, which is about orientation, which involves fantasy, which involves romance, which involves affection, which involves intimacy, which involves affection, all these things, partnering for life. That's what your orientation is all about.
Okay.
It's not just a physical act. Right. So there are some, we just said nearly 40% of men have had a physical act. But that doesn't mean they fall in love with their best mate. Yeah. And go, I want to spend the rest of my life with you. I fall in love with you. No,
so that romance thing is an interesting part of what you're explaining. So someone could have a physically enjoyable experience, but no romance, which could imply that that's not their orientation. So let's say a guy who is with a guy. So can a guy have a sex with a guy and still consider himself straight?
Yeah, totally. There's heaps of them.
So, and because the word straight implies the romantic connection rather than perhaps the physical enjoyment in that moment?
Well, we'll have to be a bit crass here. Is that okay? Yeah.
I think the internet will survive.
We've said fuck a couple of times. That'll be fine. So to put it quite plainly, for men, for many men, it doesn't matter who's on the end of it or what hole it's in.
Right.
It's about the sensation.
Friction.
Yeah.
If I get friction, I'm fine.
Yeah. You mentioned that before. I like that term. Yeah. And so they go, oh, I'm bisexual. Well, did you fall in love? Were you kissing? Was there intimacy? What was that? Oh, well, it was good. I got sucked off, or I had a hand job, or whatever I did. Does that make them gay? Does that make them same-sex oriented? I don't think so. I think that makes them just men who have sex with men.
Because it's always been these questions like around, especially like I said.
Women don't do that, do they?
Women don't just have a physical attraction and stay straight. You think there's always the emotional, because you know what they say, like women. What is it they say? They say
I'm generalizing
here. Yeah, of course. Men say I love you to have sex, and women give sex to hear I love you.
Men are from Mars, women are from Venus.
Yeah.
Gay men are from, lesbians are from Jupiter, gay men are from Uranus.
I knew you were going to say Uranus. I just knew that. It's almost a dad joke, that one is coming out.
But we're very different, male and female, and that's why you get these huge differences between the lesbian community and the gay male community. It's like these two worlds are worlds apart. We socialise differently. We do relationships differently. Everything's different.
Do you think, therefore, there is a bit of a problem with lumping the LGBTIQ, LMNOP groups all together? Because if the L and the G are so vastly different, should you be focusing on your own stuff, so to speak? Would that be more helpful rather than lumping everyone together in a, is it an anagram? Is it whatever
acronym?
Acronym.
Well, we are the LGBTI community for a reason, and the reason is that we have experienced similar things in life because of who we are. The way that we express that is very, very different. But the common things that bind us together into community, I mean, it used to be the gay community. Then, of course, the lesbians didn't want to be, they need to be acknowledged as well. So it was a lesbian and gay community. Then the people say, well, I'm bi, and then there's a trans community, and then there's the intersex community. So, and now there's a gender fluid and non-binary people, which are part of our community as well, so we have common things that bind us together, which has been discrimination, which has been misunderstanding, a whole lot of things, and that's what binds us together.
I think that one of the fascinating things I've learnt today, I like being able to understand things, and one of the things, talking about orientation, I said it, but you kind of agreed or said that was a way of looking at it, was the whole orientation tying into romance. Right. I think that's interesting.
Yeah.
So someone can be straight because they are romantic with someone of the opposite sex, but if they have sex or enjoy the company or get physical pleasure from someone of the same sex, it doesn't necessarily classify them as gay. It's interesting because one of my problems at the moment, I mean, I'm probably
tell me your problem.
Problems? You're going to put on. Do I get charged for this? We've been going for an hour and a half, so it's probably time to wrap up. That Chardonnay's waiting. But I'm probably someone who is more au fait and more in tune as a straight man with the inner workings of the LGBT community, bi community as well. Yet I'm starting to get to a point where I'm getting confused. And I think, fuck, if I'm getting confused... The average Joe or Jane on the street who hasn't been as intimately involved in this area, what must they be going through?
Yeah.
You know, like the new definitions of people. Someone said the other day, Facebook has 72 genders on it at the moment. The idea that when we talk about the transgender world, we say things, the transgender community, and I'm not part of it and I don't want to reference them like I know, because I don't know, but you hear stories about how I've always known I was a male, I feel like I'm a male. It's these kinds of words rather than, my chromosomes say this. So then people say, well, if that person feels like they're a male, that makes them a male. I feel like I'm 66. Does that make me 66? Can I be not transgender but trans-aged? There's that famous woman, Daisy or whatever her name is, who said she felt like she was African American and worked for the NAACP or whoever it was. Can you be transracial? I'm confused. And if I'm confused, I kind of think, what hope is there for anyone else to understand it? So I sit here and I learn. I had a conversation with you. I had a friend in a few weeks ago who's intersex, and we talked about the intersex community. And I'm learning. And you say that 40% disagree, right, with the same-sex marriage. I wonder if the biggest percentage of people, which are the people we need to figure out, and I'm probably one of them, are the ones who don't understand. I'm more than happy to put up my hand and say, of all the reading and writing I've done and personal experience with 2 years ago, my wife coming out as lesbian. So it's an intimate part of my actual life, not just an academic thing. If I'm confused, how many other people are confused? And if they're confused, maybe knowledge is the answer to that 40%, not attrition through all the oldies dying off. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. And, I think you've hit the nail right on the head there, because the whole basis of my organisation, Ambassadors and Bridge Builders International, is that the enemy is ignorance.
There you go.
The enemy is not churches, ex-gay organisations. The enemy is ignorance. And we create change by transforming the former instead of attacking the latter.
I think that sounds like a perfect place to head off to Sinclair for lunch.
Thank you. I think
so.
That's
Let's
good.
Have a look at that.
Okay. Yes.
Life of Unlearning.
A third edition.
Yeah.
Our ebook.
Yeah.
And also on all the major, the paperback is on all the major e-tailers all around the world.
Selling a hard book. Can you get this in New Zealand? Can you get it from bookstores, or is it go online?
Oh, it's always online.
Always online.
Always online, paperback.
Life of Unlearning, a preacher's struggle with his homosexuality, church and faith, Anthony VENN-BROWN. Anthony, you are a legend for coming and visiting Dunedin.
I'm better now.
You're better now? Who's the picture?
Oh, look, I chose that because he's gorgeous, isn't he? I wanted to have a gorgeous man on the front with a rainbow shade over his face because it evokes so many questions.
Yeah. All right. Hey, look, we appreciate immensely that you came down from Auckland for the day.
Thank you for having me and allowing me to talk so much.
No, look, this is what we do. The whole thing about this thing we do, the Department of Conversation, is one of the taglines is we talk until we're finished. And I feel like this is a nice natural place to wrap up and to pack up the gear. And thank you, Jace. Jace set up by himself today because I was doing a run to the airport. And get off for lunch and catching up with a few people and then get back on the plane to Auckland. And
maybe we should also say that if anybody's looking for information, they'll find it on www.abbi.org.au.
abbi.org.au, and I think Jace is just going to bring it up just to show us, and that can maybe be our final shot as we fade off to a lovely lunch. Are we going to see abbi.org.au?
There it is.
Is that it there? So if people want to know more about you, if people are going through these sorts of situations themselves, if they've got questions and stuff. ABBI.
There's resources, there's audios, there's a blog, there's ABBI chat where people can go and have conversations. There's everything's on there for them.
And I'm sure we'll get a copy of this up there at some stage as well, and you can use that for what you want as well.
You're wonderful. Thanks so much.
Anthony, thank you. Lunchtime.
Okay.